I think that if people understood their why, they wouldn't waste a lot of time doing things that don't mean anything to them.
You are now tuning in to the Roughnecks Podcast with your host, Cole Nixon. Much love.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Roughnecks Podcast. This is episode 249. We are finally back with a guest episode. It has been quite some time since I've done a guest. The podcast has been on a little hiatus, but I promise it's back in full force now. I kind of had to take the break. I had a lot of things going on in life and had to get my priorities straight for a little bit, but we are back with a guest episode, and joining me today is none other than Dan Davis. Dan Davis, welcome to the Roughnecks Podcast.
Cole, excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, actually. The last guest episode that I had was actually with Chad, who is our mutual, acquaintance here, and who actually kind of got me introduced to you in a way. He told me about you and said that you would be a great fit for the podcast. So I'm super excited to bring you on.
Yeah, thanks so much. Like you said, a mutual friend there, but Chad's a great human being. I'm very fortunate to have him in my life and give me some opportunities that he's given me since I retired from the military. So,
yeah, I will give Chad some praise here, because I don't think I've met a single person that hasn't said that, like, a great person to have in your life. He is somebody that is very giving, very caring, and honestly just does the good for everybody.
Absolutely.
But I like to kick off my guest episodes by allowing the guests to introduce themselves, kind of give a background on who they are, because I could do as much research, but I guarantee I'd miss something or miss some things. So kind of just tell the Roughnecks listeners who you are.
Well, Cole, I'm going to miss some things here too. After 47 years of life and kind of telling a story here where much of that life was spent in the military, my adult years. And obviously there's not a lot of record of that, some of the things that I did there. So born and raised in Parkersburg, West Virginia, graduated from Parkersburg South High School back in 1995, and went on to play collegiate baseball there at Ohio Valley University. And then after my baseball days were over, I joined the U.S. Army and spent the next 21 years in the U.S. Army. And a lot happened there, a lot of different jobs and things I was able to do while in the military. And then in 2007, married the love of my life, Mandy. We're still married today. We have 3 children together. And now we reside in Springfield, Ohio, where I'm coaching collegiate softball. And some people might say, well, softball, you're a baseball guy, but I had daughters. I was blessed with daughters, and it brought me to such an amazing game. I have a passion for coaching and really, bringing through the next generation of leaders, which is how I view all of our collegiate athletes. They're going to be going through, getting ready to start their own lives. And the just coaching in general really provides that platform. I know how much it meant to me, whether it was high school or or in college, of really building that resilience mindset. They don't understand it now while they're in it, when it's beating you down, but it definitely does. Almost everything that happens on the ball field, I can translate into some type of life lesson that you're going to have to deal with, whether it's riding the highs or the lows, and figuring that out. So retired from the military, that's what I'm doing now. And I also work with Chad with Mindset Matters Athletics, where we kind of developed a program, wrote a book together, and we will travel around and do different, whether it's team culture or individual training with athletes of all levels, and just really helping them understand the mental aspects of the game. And I think that both Chad and my background really play into that with our law enforcement background, military background. And that's kind of where I'm at right now in life. And so yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a package deal of who I or what I'm doing now and what I've kind of been up to for the last 47 years.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that we will be able to dive into between the military, coaching, athletics, and mindset matters athletics, and all like with all of that. I kind of want to start though, kind of a little bit back at the beginning, almost like just kind of follow the timeline with the
Yes.
military. What was your decision, I guess? Like, what made you kind of or drove you to join the military?
Well, Cole, in 2001, when I figured out that I wasn't going to be playing baseball any longer, I had a degree, didn't know what I was going to do with it. It was a liberal studies degree. Um, and so I went to the recruiter, and my buddy had went in under the loan repayment plan. He had graduated about 2 years prior to me, and he had joined the military under that plan. And so yeah, it was college money at that time. I was facing $35,000 in debt, and so I went. They initially turned me away due to the fact that I had an injury with my left ankle, and that was really tough for me because I'm like, oh man, what's next? There was nothing that I felt that I had to be part of a team. It's really crazy to say. A lot of that has to do with my just upbringing and how much a team environment meant to me. And so they said no initially. And I think I went back in 4 months, met a recruiter that said, I'll take you down to the MEP station. We'll get you checked out. And thank God for that recruiter, going the extra mile, because not only he rack up a lot of recruiting bonuses, high grad bonus. There was all kinds of things there. I was also allowed to join the United States Army. I went in as a corrections officer initially in the U.S. Army. Planned on doing my 3 years, getting out, 4 years getting out, and I just kind of enjoyed it. Honestly, I really enjoyed my time in the military.
I want to kind of ask too a little bit. You mentioned, sorry about that. You mentioned, getting turned away at first, and also something that you mentioned earlier with, those lessons that coaches maybe teach you earlier in life. Did that also kind of have a little impact on it? Because I know like you mentioned, you may not realize in the moment, in that, like when you're playing high school sports, college sports, coaches say things, you think it's just related to the game. I'm
Yeah,
guilty of this too, because me and my buddies still talk like, man, I remember when Sev said this in like a pregame speech, like he wasn't talking about football. Like he was, but he was also talking about life and like those kind of
right.
things. So did sports also kind of maybe impact your mindset when you got turned away the first time, which is not ideal and not exactly what you wanted to hear?
So much of it, so much failure, especially building the game that I played of baseball, and having to continually uh, get back up and pull up your pants and get back to work. And it was kind of tough because, I mean, here you're being told no. I think I was 23 at that time. So I was going in later. I had my degree, but really had no path. And it was one of those things, man. It knocked me down. I'm like, oh my goodness, what's next? There might have been a few nights there where I was looking at that at the end of a bottle, but I eventually had to say, all right, is there a way still? Is there a way? What is he missing something? Like, what caused me to go back? I don't know the answer of why I went back. I remember how many times they had called me when I was 18, 19. I'm sure you remember those days.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but they just
Actually,
blow up your phone.
One of the Stingrays coaches, Moeller, who is part of the Vans team, he was my recruiter in high school, and it's funny because him and my boss actually coached that team together for a while. So we ran into each other, and he's like, "You still thinking about joining?" And I'm like, "I did consider it, but it was like he was my
Yeah.
recruiter for the National Guard."
Yeah. So, they blow up your phone. And at that time at 18, I was kind of like in that, um, like, I'm going to play baseball. I'm doing something in baseball. So like, you're just wasting your time. Like, I'm going to school to play baseball. I mean, that was my mentality. And there's a lot to unpack there as well, because I was so focused on that my grades really struck. I was there for one reason, and it didn't work out. But honestly, it did work out. It just wasn't how I had planned it. The Lord had different plans for me, and we'll get into that. But what a roller coaster ride. So yes, I think the resilience of just the word no, and this will come back. If we can get there legally, ethically, and morally, we can get the yes. Just it might take more work, and that's kind of the mentality. And again, I'll circle back to that later on as we run through my military career. But just that mentality in itself got me into some really cool opportunities in life, having that mentality.
Let's kind of dive into your military career a little bit, because I mean, obviously, I don't know the full story. I know you have done multiple deployments, and some of them, were no notice, I believe. And so, kind of just take us through your military career, and just kind of because you spent, I believe, what, 20 years?
Yeah, just a little bit over 20.
So, kind of just take us through that journey of being in the military.
All right, this is the crazy thing about the military. Opportunities abound everywhere. I'm telling you, once you're there, if you have a go-getter mentality, it doesn't matter where you started from. You can really achieve some things that you would probably not even imagine. So I started in 2001. First military assignment was at United States Disciplinary Barracks in Leavenworth, Kansas. So I went there after basic training, and this was like, I think I got my duty assignment sometime in July of 2001. And obviously we all know, well, this generation may not, but my generation absolutely knows what happened on September 11th of 2001. And that changed the whole course of, I think, a lot of military careers, families. The National Guard took such a huge role in that, and just across the whole spectrum of the Department of Defense really kind of shook us and got us back to our warfighting type, where we should have been probably all along. And regardless of what we did there and all the politics behind it, we really got where the number one thing was we were a war fighter first. We're that mentality. So I finished that out, and that MOS that I joined was non-deployable. It was this is even crazy. They had this in the U.S. military. I remember signing up, and they're going through jobs, and I'm like, no. And they're like, what about a corrections guard? And it's non-deployable. And I said, give me that one. I'm never gonna. I just go to my job, and this is great. So what you think that you don't know. And so I go in, do 4 years there. And in between that deployment, that duty station and my next was, I was able to go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which brought me back closer to home. Now in there, and a little bit sidebar here. So I had a child out of wedlock at that time. His name, Austin Daniel Davis. So Austin was born. I was trying to get back closer to spend, at least be closer to him. And that became one of my my next duty station was Fort Knox, Kentucky. So his mom's living in Cincinnati, close to that area. So I was only like an hour and a half away. It was great. And I was able to spend some time with him, in his younger years there, just being at that duty station. Continued there being a corrections guy, internment resettlement, it was called. And we were 95 Charlie series. That was the series, the MOS. Well, then it became deployable. Like I said, those first years, I was like 26 years old. We all talk about that time when we grow up as a, from a young man, to a man, whatever you want to call it. that didn't happen to me when I was first in the military. Even at 23, I was, I was doing all the right things for the military, but for me personally, I wasn't really, achieving some of the things that I wanted to. But people would say, my goodness, you were fast tracking in the Army. And I remember I was a staff sergeant at that time. I was sitting in the meeting. First sergeant was in there, and they said, "Hey, we need a volunteer to deploy for corrections." And my hand shot up. And like I said, at that time, I didn't know where my life was really headed at that time. I didn't know what was going on. And so he helped me after the meeting. He's like, Dan, is this really what you want to do right now? And I said, yeah, I think I need this. So I deployed during that time, spent 12 months in Iraq. A little bit of it was at Camp Prosperity and a couple other places. And really it was just doing detainee operations. That was kind of it. So they had a lot of people at that time. Abu Ghraib just happened. And so there's some abuse things going on, and it really got some national attention. So they took what they were calling us as detainee operations NCOs or experts, plugging us into different detainee. There was different levels, facility levels, 2-week levels, long-term. And so, I was there. I was an individual augmentee at that time. So it just means I didn't go over with a unit. I just went over by myself. And I guess that started the whole internal affairs thing, right? Because my job at that time was to make sure everything was flowing correctly. Treatment was, fair and just, according to the Geneva Convention. All of that type of stuff was going on. So I did that, got through that deployment, and I have to mention this because here was the turning point. If we go all the way back to the start of my life, my parents divorced when I was 5 years old, like many today. Many people grow up in a single family home. That's just a single parent home. When my parents divorced when I was 5, my father's a very religious man, and my mother at that time, was more of a free spirit. And so I lived with my father till I was 14. So a lot of structure there. My stepmom, who eventually definitely earned the term for me, mom. So I was blessed with 2 moms. Taught me so much growing up. And listen, being a step parent is that's a tough business. So I go back to that to say I was there. Then I moved with my mom when I was 14 and had a great time there. But my mom battled, my mom, rest her soul, she battled alcohol addiction, depression, very bad. So I got to see both sides of the world, really. So as I'm going on that deployment, and I remember flying in. It was a NATO bird. It was the craziest thing. We had Japanese pilots there, so that whole construct was kind of awkward. And I remember they said, don your Kevlars, we're entering a combat zone. And a Kevlar's being obviously like a batting helmet, so I was like, oh, I mean business now, like strap up. And when I did that, like I told you before, I did, this is 2006, October 19th, 2006. I remembered I wasn't living like I thought I should. So at that time I said a prayer. I said, Lord, if you get me back home, I'm going to change my mindset. I'm going to change the way I do business. I'm going to change my life, and I want to serve you. And so it's just crazy. After that happened, I had chased my wife for about 8 years, just different ways. Here I am deployed. And I said, God, if I ever marry anybody, it'll be her. It won't be anybody else. So answer prayer. I'm over there, start talking with my wife now again. And I come home on that, like you get that midterm leave or whatever it's called. My military jargon has kind of left me at this point in time. So I'm into the more hip crowd now with the younger generation and have the teenage daughters. But So we get that that R&R, they called it, like 18 days, I think, at that time. So in 1 year, you got like 18 days to come home, do whatever. And I came back home. Mandy and I spent some time together there. And by the time I came back, we were getting married, and life just changed. My whole outlook on life changed. And I felt like that there was not only to have to support her, but to start a family. And we did that. And I said, but there's more to this military thing, man. This is kind of cool. I got to deploy. What else is out there? And the next thing, I put in an application to be a special agent. So that would be like NCIS in the Navy. Obviously gets a lot more press than Army CID does, but it's kind of the same mission set of investigating, felonies, felony level offenses with a Department of Defense nexus. So I did that, go to school, graduate that school, and get my badge and credentials. And then, man, I'm like rolling straight law enforcement, street clothes or dressing for whatever the mission calls for daily. So I'm working all the ways from murders to rapes to narcotics, just the whole gamut there, financial crimes, everything. And so that kind of hit it. I'm there for doing that for about 2.5 years. We get assignment to Alaska. Now, when AK came up, I said, is this Arkansas? No, that says AK. So here we are. And I tell my wife, we're in Fort Knox. And I said, we're headed to Alaska. And we'd only been married about 2 years at this time. And she's very close with her family. And so we're off to Alaska. And we spent 2 years there. Well, about 1.5 years into that, I remember what was called a frago came out, or it's like a fragmentation order. Basically, it said, hey, there's a special missions unit. They are, I got to just be careful here what I'm saying. There's a lot of stuff out there, but the bottom line is that they were looking for applicants. So with that, in 2011, I assessed and was selected for the Delta Force. And so I spent the next, from 2012 to 2018 there doing a lot of classified missions all over the world. And then I would have retired there. I would have never left, but I chose to get promoted. And so then I was promoted to the rank of Sergeant Major in the U.S. Army. And I went out to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and spent my last 2 years there, 3 years actually it turned into, as the Directorate of Emergency Services Sergeant Major. So dealing with fire, police, and those type of things. And then I retired, and there's a lot to unpack there, but that is kind of my timeline of times in the Army Corps.
Yeah, the first question I got to ask is, because you've been all over the place, kind of.
Yes.
Like you've been to multiple different states, multiple different countries. Which of them would you say is your favorite? Like that you spent the time in? Was it Alaska? Was it Arizona? Like you've been in different places. So like which did you enjoy? Maybe not necessarily just based on like career or anything like that, but just the place in general as well.
So, man, to pin me down on the one is kind of hard, but Alaska will always hold a special place there, just because I like the outdoors. I like to when I was up there, I don't love to fish as much as my son now does, but I was able to ice fish. That was a really cool type thing to do up there. Just a lot to do outside. The family, we would get out and hike a lot, things like that. Now, on the back end of that, I would say North Carolina was my favorite place to be, honestly, because of the job that I was doing every day in and day out. It's great too, but Arizona might be the most beautiful state. Again, I was down on the southern border, where the Huachuca Mountains are at Fort Huachuca, and it's right there on the border, the Mexican border, and close to it, about 8 miles off. and just the landscape. I felt like I was on a resort the entire time that I was there, just with the backdrop, the scenery, the mountains in the backdrop was amazing.
Yeah, the other question I wanted to ask, I guess, kind of about the military is there. I mean, I have a few more, but I guess the big one
Sure.
is like, what would you say is your biggest lesson or like biggest takeaway from your time that you spent in the military? Like, because you've spent nearly half your life almost
Yeah.
in the military, so I know there's probably multiple, but like, what is something that you think will carry with you for the rest of your life?
Um, well, two of them we plugged into the Elevate program. Uh, Number one is an elite mindset. That's definitely number one. Your mindset determines: are you saying I get to or I have to? Day in and day out on the grind. Do I get to do this or do I have to do that? I think because of the military, you get to compare so many different countries, get to see so many different cultures, get to see the worst in the world. And the best, and you get to see the best that come out of people too, especially in chaos unfortunately even in tragedies. And so for me, number one is your mindset. Like, how are you approaching day in and day out, and consistency in that mindset? We're all going to have a bad, people say, "Oh, I'm having a bad day," but can we cut that down? Can we chop it up to only a bad couple hours? Like maybe, So I think that the biggest thing that came out of that was mindset, because that is the biggest separator. Honestly, to be in a tier one organization is an individual's mindset. If you want to be the best, you better have a strategies and tactics and things like that you can rely on, because life's real hard, and it gets. I tell our athletes today, it doesn't get easier. Life gets harder. You just get better with dealing with hard. So, yeah, I'll go with that. I mean, I could go through a whole litany list of things that I learned in the military, but number one is your mindset for sure.
Yeah, I wish, especially because I played college sports as well, and I wish that was something I took a little more serious. Is the get to versus have to. I
Yes.
wish looking back is like, because once it's gone too,
Yeah.
especially like it's gone, and it's not like a gradual into this it's gone kind of thing. Like when it's gone, it's gone in the snap of a finger, and you don't even, sometimes you may not even know it. That's the crazy part, is because I mean my senior year of college football was the COVID years, so I didn't really
Yeah.
have a college senior year. And I wish you don't know that going into the end of your junior year. You don't know that I played 3 games my senior year, and that was it. And they were more so scrimmages than they were games. So
Sure.
when it's gone, it's gone. And I wish more. That's why I love what you and Mindset Matters Athletics do, is kind of getting people to realize that kind of stuff, and just the mindset side of things, because it's not as talked about. It wasn't as talked about, back even when I was in school. It wasn't as big of a thing. Now it is becoming a bigger thing, and I'm very glad and grateful for that, because it's going to help athletes not only on the field but off the field as well.
Yeah. 100% that I don't. Obviously, during my time, it was how hard can you run through the wall, right? And
Yep.
and there's a lot to that. Like that is part of it, and I think that's what It's not all unicorns and rainbows for sure. And I even even sometimes when teams are reaching out and things like that, I'm like, I have great material. Here's the thing. Yes, it's for everybody just to have the information, but they have to make the choice. Now, you can design your program around it a little bit, make it an emphasis, be intentional about it. But at the end of the day, I think that is what it's done, is given athletes the ability to make a choice that maybe they did not know that they had prior to having the training. Like finding yourself in that situation and knowing you've got a reset routine, and that you should go to that, but are you going to choose to apply that, or are you going to just allow your emotions to run rampant and destroy being where your feet are, being in the present moment? So
I kind of wanted to ask too, kind of about the military. Did the military, in your opinion, help, maybe influence, maybe not completely, shape how you do everything, but maybe influence the way you coach and the way you handle things as a coach with Mindset Matters Athletics, with both sides of coaching on, softball and the Mindset Matters as well?
The the military played into that, but I want to talk my time in the military, and my best friend just retired. So I can talk about him a little bit more now because, he worked at that place we talked about for about 14 years. And he was my boss, and some couldn't handle this, but he was also my best friend. And you have to understand the way that we did business it was just him and I. So we traveled the world together. We got a lot of sticky situations together, and he's brilliant. And he also had a daughter that was very successful in the game of softball. Both our lives are crazy. So I played all Army softball too, and people will be like, "What is that?" So it's another thing, right? That to package up through that whole Army career. That's just an opportunity. It was slow pitch softball where basically all four branches of service they would have assessments, selections, tryouts. You would be together for about, when I first started in 2003 was my first year, was about 5 weeks together. They've trimmed that up some now. It's not that long, but it was an opportunity to play against the other sports. So it's called all Army sports. There's all Armed Forces sports. And it's just that they have it in boxing. Some of them lead to the Olympics. Other ones don't. Like this is just to say, let's just say his name, Elmer Mason, is my best friend, man. This guy has been with me there through so much. And you got to align yourself with like-minded people and to be a little bit better than you too, right? And that's important, especially if they'll bring you along. And so Elmer did that. I met him to become a special agent. He was already an agent. He was like, "Hey, Dan, you should try this." We weren't even at the same duty stations, but so we played some softball together. We ended up playing in 2006 together, the All-Army team. And by 2019, I was already done. My playing days were over, but I had the opportunity to coach that team. I applied for it, was selected to be the coach. And of course, the first person I'm reaching out to was Elmer at that time. And he's like, "Yes, I'll come be your assistant coach," because we had worked, I had moved on. This was towards the end of my career. And so we coached that team together and really started applying this mental performance to, high level. These guys are military guys, but a lot of them had played high level college baseball. We're just great athletes. And we started talking about the failure and emotions and controlling that. And if you can control your tongue, if you have that ability, you can control so many other things in your thoughts. And so we really laid it on thick that year. And we had a great year. We didn't win it. The Air Force robbed the ball of one of our guys over the fence, and boom, the Air Force won the gold medal. But it was a great shift in mindset for that program. And when you know it, I went on and retired. Elmer took the program over for the last 2 years. He went undefeated a season with them. They won the gold medal just this year. And just hearing the positive impact of those guys that are getting met with hard work every day, but a smile, somebody that they know that the coach cares about them more as a person than what you can do for me on the field. I just think that I've had this ability to really tap into my playing days as far as I get away from them. And, the old saying goes, you'll remember how somebody made you feel, maybe not what they said. And there's a lot of truth to that. And just those people that believed in you. And, I don't get way off topic here, but just our last year of coaching, we were very intentional. It was my first year. The head coach that hired me, Ashley Goodwin, former Ohio State alum, softball player for 4 years. She's here at Wittenberg. And she hired me, and she told me, she said, "Dan, I want you to come in here to help our athletes be more mentally tough." And I think that everybody thinks that word mentally tough means that you're okay to run through the brick wall, but there's so much more to it than that. There's so much trust that has to be built with your team up front, that you know that you care more for them as a person than what they can do for you on the field.
Yeah, the the mental side of things, especially, and that's, I think we always had coaches who cared. I won't
Yes.
say, at least I personally did. You
Yeah,
know,
same here.
you always have the coaches who care, but it was always like you said, running. How hard can you run through that brick wall?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So kind of going off of it too is what with the mindset, like what is, I know you guys have the Elevate program, kind of explain that. Let's go into that and just kind of explain what it is and kind of how it was formed.
Okay. So if Chad and I would package up our careers, what he's learned in law enforcement, Chad has a great athletic career and coaching resume behind it. So not only has he done everything from go to the FBI Academy, being a very high up in the sheriff's office, to working, a lot. He's actually worked law enforcement, and not only in Licking County, but down in Florida, he's seen a lot of different things, a lot of different leadership styles. And, both of his sons have coached at the collegiate level, played at the collegiate level at a high level. His daughter now is an amazing softball player. She will be able to do the same if that's what she chooses. So he's doing something right there. Okay. And it's not just DNA, but I think that Chad will even say, and the same thing if I go back to my best friend, which I kind of got off tangent there, and Elmer would say, I made some mistakes along the way. And man, I really wish I could have packaged it with this mental performance. And that's what this is about. It's about not only impacting our own, family to be better fathers, husbands, workers, whatever it might be, but then to build the better athlete. And Elevate is what we came up with. We started with Brian Kane. We went and got certified through Brian Kane, who's world renowned. His stuff is amazing, and it really makes a lot of sense. So we looked at Brian Kane, we got certified through it, and we said, but we would really like to have some of our training packaged into this, some life lessons that we had. So we came up with this, this list, and it was kind of all over the place. And I said, Chad, can you use your creative mind and give us an acronym? Like, I was an acronym guy from the military. Like, we have an acronym for everything. And, then he was like, we had it all packaged up, and we had 7 different things laid out, and he came back out with Elevate, and we were able to package that up. So what is Elevate? It is a 7-step process that I get out of bed every day and I check for myself to make sure that I'm still following along. But there's so many tactics and strategies and things laid inside of that there's something for everybody in there. It starts with elite mindset. So if we run through Elevate and what those letters are, elite mindset. And this is just saying we have all had a fixed mindset in some areas. Do you have a fixed mindset of, oh, I just can't do that because I'm whatever? Or do you have a growth mindset that says, I can do whatever if I work really hard and I put in the work and I take all these steps and, I can get better than I was yesterday, and kind of use that to achieve goals. In that is the elite mindset behind it, just in a nutshell right there. And to realize that's a choice. And that's kind of what the whole thing, we talk about things you can control. Your body language, your focus, and your self-talk. And we go through that and we identify that to the athlete. Like, what does your body language look like when you're at your best versus at your worst? And they'll write it down. They'll tell you right there. What is your focus like when it's at your best versus your worst? Well, at my best, I'm so locked in. All I can think about is where I'm at right then. I'm so excited to compete versus where's your focus at your worst? It's, I could be anywhere other than right here, right now. Like, what are we having for dinner tonight? Like, just get me off of this field. I don't want to be here, right? So you've lost focus. And then finally, your self-talk, which confidence boils down to the number one thing as the levels continue to creep up. And again, I have had the opportunity to work with high level athletes, and it all comes back to confidence. Almost at every level, I'll say, whether it's high school, college, professional, it doesn't matter. They'll all come back to confidence. Why is that? Because they're playing at the highest level that they can play, and the talent level always evens out eventually. So what's your only, you better have some strategies for your mind, because that's really where it lays out. So we start with elite mindset. We go into line of action, which is a little bit of a military term, right? Line of action, but honestly, it's just developing the plan. It is writing out your mission statement, having a plan to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And it really boils down to why. Why are you doing it? I think that if people understood their why, they wouldn't waste a lot of time doing things that don't mean anything to them. I know as younger athletes, sometimes we don't have the choice, right? Our just parents think it's the best thing for us, and and then that all manifests eventually. Like I said, I have teenage daughters now, so I well know that these things will manifest eventually. But so are we doing it for our parents? Or is there something intrinsic that we'll do it for, something internally, versus always external factors that drive us? So if you got a big enough why, you're probably going to figure out how to do it. So that's the line of action. Then we talk about probably my favorite one, straight out of Jocko, and that is extreme ownership. Because we've all struggled with it at times, but I really think that, this is a touchy word in today, and it sure was when I was working as a special agent. Victim mentality, right? People get, oh, well, there are victims. Absolutely. You can be a victim of something, but you can also be the victor over that circumstance, no matter how bad. So what is your mentality there? Are you taking extreme ownership? Are you, the ability to self-assess, I think, is one of the critical things that just I think the world in general struggles with. Again, I'm thankful for my background that I had both of these spectrums of very religious and free, more like, I think that I'm able to look at even whatever we look at today and see down the middle a little bit better and try to at least understand where somebody's coming from. But when we talk about extreme ownership, we have to look inwards first and eat that. And listen, that's one of those things that starts at the dinner table, and it could really go sideways really quick. Okay, so even as a coach, I'm telling you that can go sideways. So none of us are perfect. We can all throw rocks, for sure. But I think that we will help out our student athletes much more if we can just go back to things they can control. Right. And you can control. And that's where extreme ownership is totally there. It's like, oh, yeah, well, I didn't get past the ball 5 times. Yeah, but you took about 20 plays off. Like, look at this. Like, you just gave up. Right. So if you clean that up, maybe the ball will find you more. I don't know. I'm just throwing out anything. But extreme ownership, huge in the program. We talk about visualization. Listen, I did not understand visualization until honestly, the military really let me know. Every time that I was going out to do something, I started visualizing in my mind how I wanted things to go. And then I really started visualizing if things did not go well, what kind of course of action was I going to take? How did I want to behave in those situations? So I'll link this back into athletics, particularly baseball or softball. We all played wiffle ball in the backyard. We all hit the 7th inning home or the 9th inning home run to win the game. But we never visualized or even thought about booting the ball in the 1st inning in a big game and how I was going to respond to that. So I don't think it's a lot of time to dwell on it, but I think you have to create a blueprint there of how you want to respond in chaotic situations. That for surely I learned in the military, and it was extremely beneficial. So that's the visualization side. There's some techniques there that we go through as well. Attitude's a big one. It's really having an attitude of gratitude. All the things we talked about was I get to be here. I don't have to be here. I remember my 6 a.m., 5 a.m. practices in college. And I don't even know if I could have tricked my mind enough at that time, but it sure did pay off by the time I got to the military. That's for sure. Because there was plenty of those. And our athletes here, they do that. There's 6 a.m. lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't think a whole lot of programs are doing that, especially at our level. But they get it in, and we talk about that all the time. Like, you get to be here, man. And what a great opportunity when you swung out of bed today to get your feet on the ground and have this opportunity. So a lot of intentionality on attitude. When we talk about the training piece of Elevate, we're really talking about all the strategies packaged up in there, all the way from concentration grids, which are an amazing focus tool. We do a lot of competitions with those when we go out and work with teams. And again, another thing that obviously it's been out there for a while, but really got made a lot of headway with Brian Kane and his program. But the entire training module will put a lot of things in there. The BFS worksheet. Obviously, we talk about the MVP process individually and for teams. And that's great to write a mission statement, especially when you're on mission to complete something. So it kind of holds you accountable. And then finally, the last one, the Elevate, that I think I was talking about, the self-assessment piece, is kind of wraps this up, and it was perfect. And the ability to evaluate where you are. I'd recommend doing that weekly to everybody. For whatever it is in life, whether it's your finances all the way to your family and, whatever role that you're playing is, what did I do well? Give yourself some grace up front. What do I need to do better? And how in the world am I going to do it? And I think if you just live by that, well, better, how, you're going to be a little bit better than you were the day prior. So, and obviously this works in cycles. So sometimes you'll fall back into those slumps, or those lulls, like Pete Roche used to call them. He said, nobody slumps in baseball. It's a lull, and you just got to make the adjustment. So great words of wisdom by the greatest hitter ever. Right. So, that's our program. And, Cole, I think I'm going to take this opportunity to really go into something deep here and why I chose mental performance. And why I kind of chose this post-career military track. So like I said, everything was great in 2006. I changed my life, had a different mindset, a different approach. I was able to compartmentalize so well, no matter all the horrifying things I had seen versus coming home and being a father and trying to be present during that. Because there was a lot going on at that time in my life, but I just really felt that I had the ability to compartmentalize. And then COVID happened, which impacted everybody so differently. And again, I was in Arizona at that time, and I spoke of my son earlier, Austin Daniel. And so I'm out in Arizona, and my son, he's growing up in Cincinnati, soon to be a junior in high school. And I got a call from his mom. It was around 3:00 in the morning, and my son had been killed in a tragic car accident. Right. So all of those doors that I'd knocked on all those years and had to alert families of losing their loved ones, whether it be in combat or for whatever reason. I'd worked a lot of cases, right? A lot of tragedy that I had seen. And it all came piling on at that time. And I remember, honestly, it was the reason I retired from the military, because I thought that God had a different plan for my life than where I was right there. I could have probably stayed in another 10 years and done some more cool things. But I really wanted to be present with my family. I wanted my children to be able to get to a school where that they were kind of able to hunker in a little bit. And listen, I don't have a problem ever mentioning my son's name or talking about it, right? And I do it in a lot of the settings that I do. And here's the reason. I said life will hit you hard. they say that I got hit with the hardest tragedy that can impact a human being, and that is losing your son or daughter, right? Especially at a young age, going into junior year. Austin was killed. He was probably driving a little too fast, but all the particulars haven't really come out, all the way on that. But here's the bottom line: he was going fishing with buddies, fishing poles in the back, going to do what he loved to do. My youngest son now, he loves fishing too. I wish they loved hunting more because that's my thing, but I'll take him fishing. So he was doing that, and the road was kind of wet, and he lost his life. Another young man lost his life that night. Another one was injured pretty bad, and Austin was driving that car, and I think the biggest thing was when I look back on that, all the tests came back. I think it makes a father feel very good that his son wasn't intoxicated or there was nothing there in his system. It was obviously all the things that we did as growing up, and for whatever reason, the Lord called him home, and it doesn't make sense, but I had a choice to make, and I think so many get caught up, and here's so my sister-in-law sends me a song soon after that. I never even understood the power of music. I thought music was just to hype you up, right? So I never really got into it, and she sent me this song 21 years by Toby Mac. And he had lost his son at 21 years. And just the words were so powerful to me at that time. I listened to that song probably 5 times a day, as I was going through that. And I still probably listen to it once a day now. And here's the reason that I do what I do now. And the reason that I probably have a lot of empathy, again, from my background, for our youth and our young adults coming up, and why this is powerful. I remember Jocko wrote about, he had his podcast on about it. He was talking about, if you lose somebody, you got to get back up. You got to get back up. It's a different time for different people. And that's where I was. And I remember he said, you got to write him a letter. He said, you write him a letter and you package it up, you tell him what you're going to do, but your life has to go on. And here I had a young family, my beautiful wife who stuck with me through all that and all the other chaos that, the military life brings. And, I had to get where I thank God for my time with my son, that and the lessons that I've learned after, and to ensure that his life still had meaning. A lot of people start scholarships and things like that. For me, I'm not a business guy, although I try to do a little bit of business. You just, in public service, you're just always giving. So I remember that letter I wrote, and I just said, I'm going to use this, your name, son, and I'm going to go out and help as many people as I can. And I'm going to do it through athletics, because I think that that's where really it's my escape from reality, right? Some people's playing the guitar, some people, and that's, I'll never put anything on my own kids to I think team sports are great. They should do it at some point in time in their life, but to live that life, I wouldn't do that. It's just like, find your passion. Mine's athletics, because it's taught me so much. And I said, I'm going to reach other people. And I turned around, I got my master's degree right after that in sports management, and coaching philosophy. I started diving into John Wooden's stuff, right? Maybe the most legendary coach of all time, especially collegiate athletics, where it's not all business yet, although it's turning that way now, at least at the higher levels. But just how he cared for his athletes way more than what they could do for him on the court. And it was that his book is, I'd have to go back and look at it now, but I bet my professors got sick of seeing him in quotations all the time, because his pillars and his pillar that he designed and everything is so powerful. And he was a man of God, and everything was education. It was always a way to teach. So that's really what I patterned into my coaching. And so we retired and we came back here, and that's when Chad's like, hey man, you heard of this Brian King? Like, everything that you're spitting is like, because I brought my daughter on. My daughter's a great softball player, my oldest, and she had the opportunity. She's been playing with the Stingrays for a while, his organization. And he's like, man, just the way you approach the game it was refreshing. And so I knew I had a gift there, a gift to communicate and to actually reach the younger generation. Even as you get older, that becomes more difficult. That's why I said I got to do this now, because listen, at 55 and 60, they start looking at you as somebody else than when you're like 45, right? Like it eventually time catches up with us, especially to relate to the youngest generation. So it means so much to me, way past the business side of Mindset Matters Athletics. I believe that this is the avenue that I use to then help them when life becomes really hard, right? Because athletics should be fun, enjoyable. You're going to fail a lot. There's going to be a lot of sucky moments in it. But that does not mean you don't get back up, right? Because you're not going to have an option soon. And if you do take the out, it will not be beneficial for you or anybody around you or for those that you're responsible for. So again, I have a great passion doing it. I'm getting ready to work with the lacrosse team. Listen, I like contact sports. Those are fun for me. I played baseball, so that was more of a thinking man's game. But I just like that. You know, it parallels a lot well with the military. So I like talking to those teams. But honestly, any teams I enjoy the opportunity to speak with, because you know, it goes back to my son, who had kind of given up athletics at that time, but he was super successful, very good in computers. I mean, he was so intelligent. He was doing kind of like media for his school. So it's cool to go back and watch his videos, kind of doing a little bit of what you're doing now. You know, his school was good, man. And they kind of did news in the morning and stuff. So I think that if I'm able to show up every day with a smile on my face and tell my story, that it gives hope, bottom line. So that's why I always have a smile. I'm always trying to have a good time. Do I have moments? Absolutely. And I think we all do. And I also know everybody's going through something. Bottom line, everybody's going through something. So I just want to be a little bit of hope out there, man.
I can tell you, because we talked off air before with we actually met each other for say at the Stingrays Day, but sure. I didn't recognize it at the moment. But you know, I can tell you exactly, like you said, you giving people hope. You do that because the entire time. That's why I had actually quite a bit of footage of you, because I'm like, he's just happy to be here. And it's like the opportunity, like you've mentioned opportunities a lot on this podcast, and opportunities are huge. And sometimes you don't realize the opportunities until it's too late. And that's one of the big things of recognizing opportunities and taking them. And even if it's no different than, you know, not bringing it back to me for say, but if I get a videography gig, even if it's something I've never done before, it's like, this is the opportunity. Now that's where you can work with the business side of things on that. But you do give that hope. And like you said, do I have my moments? Yes. But that's what makes us human. We're not always perfect. And that's the whole going back to the evaluation thing. Is you have to evaluate. Yes, you're going to have your moments, but what can I do to maybe, you know, decrease or not make it as big, maybe not a huge blow up or something like that. It's just kind of taking those moments and making the best out of them in a way. So I give you a lot of praise, and that's why I wanted to talk to a little bit about, this is why I love Mindset Matters Athletics. Between you and Trap, you guys are business, yes, but at the same time, what makes you guys so good is the fact that you care. You care. Whatever opportunity comes your way, doesn't matter if it could be, you know, your rival school per se growing up, or you know, if you're a Ohio State fan, it could be Michigan. You wouldn't care. You care about the fact of the matter of helping athletes. That's why I love your guys' organization and everything that you guys do.
Again, thank you again for the platform to come out here and just talk about it a little bit. Although we talked about it so much more, that's where I'm at my point in my life right now, is giving back to this next generation, you know, because there's not a lot of hope out there every time we turn on the TV. And listen, I lived it for 21 years, where what's the next thing that's coming up, the next tragedy, the next whatever it was. And honestly, just being where your feet are in the moment and being able to realize that And there's so many ways out there and strategies to be able to do that. And if you don't even have the strategies to do it, you will be overcome by emotion, because we're just emotional human beings. So we have to learn how to control that to some aspect. Emotion's great. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't want anybody that's walking around like a robot. Like you said, emotion is what, and honestly, it's what makes a softball game so much fun. It's how excited that they get. But I'll tell you, the female athlete will also beat themselves up a lot more sometimes than even the male athlete will. But I'll tell you, both. I mean, I just, when you get down into the individual coaching, there's not a lot of difference there, right? We put our ego out in front of us a lot of times, as a male, but it's the same things that are creeping in. How do I play with confidence? You play with confidence by, number one, putting in the preparation. People forget that part, and that's with a unicorn and rainbows. Like, I can't expect to be great if I've never done anything, and I'm just going to get up and, hit a ball coming at me at 65 with all this movement. Like, no, you have to prepare for it, and then you have to visualize success. You also have to visualize some of the down moments that could happen, lay the blueprint for that, and, just one more crazy story I got to tell you about. I never wanted to jump out of airplanes. I always thought it was a bad idea. But when I assessed and was selected for an airborne unit, I had no choice, right? It was part of the gig. So I go to airborne school, and listen, a lot of guys that go to airborne school, and gals, they do it very young, like right when they come out of basic training. They'll hit airborne school. They'll be 18, 19, 20 years old. I think I was 34, 35 when I went through airborne school. I was already a master sergeant U.S. Army. So I was the older guy. And I think because of that, so you go through 3 weeks of airborne school, and then you jump out of an airplane 5 times and you're done, right? You just got to make it 5 landings, get to the on the drop zone, get off, and you're good. Well, week 1, pretty simple ground week. You're just kind of jumping off a box and a lot of running, things like that. Week 2, you jump out of a tower, and it's kind of like it's like a bungee cord. It kind of takes you down like the path would if you were in the air. You go down and kind of go to the other side. It's just letting you feel that first type of like that jump. And when the parachute, because on a static line, I'm not talking about some high altitude, low opening stuff. I'm talking about static line jumping, where basically your parachute just, it goes full canopy almost as soon as you exit the aircraft, because it's hooked up, right? So you're going out. And then the final week is called jump week. And again, 5 jumps, boom, you're good. No issue. So we went through training, and, there was a 10-minute block of instruction. I promise you, it was only 10 minutes. And they talked about if your suspension wires got tangled over your head, what you're supposed to do to untangle them so you don't have to pull your reserve, and hopefully you'll go full canopy and you can open. Well, they only probably spent 10 minutes on that. Maybe it doesn't happen that often. So I'm not one of these airborne guys that had 100 jumps or anything like that. So, but I made it through school, and barely though. So I remember I'm there, I'm visualizing, hey, I remember the night before, like, I got to go jump out of this airplane, like, and it's every day I'm jumping out of an airplane, sometimes twice a day. And it was crazy. I'm like, man, what if my suspension lines get? Okay, I put my hands above my head, I bicycle kick. That's going to make me come out of it and, go to full canopy. Well, that whole week that I was jumping out, even in Tower Week, like I was a basketball player going up for a layup. It never got corrected. I don't know if it didn't get corrected because, again, I was like the oldest guy in the group, right? This guy's probably figuring this out. So when I exit that aircraft, 1,500 feet above the Earth's surface, going about 100 miles per hour, I did that, and the wind caught me. That force caught me because I didn't jump straight out. I jumped up, and it threw my body, threw my right shoulder off the plane. I hit my Kevlar on the side of the plane. I remember I said, you hit the plane jumping out of this thing? Like, I'm trying to do the geometry in my head. Like, okay, you exit and I see most guys just go straight down. Well, I jumped. I did. I hit the side of the plane, so I'm spinning in the air, and like, oh my goodness! I try to put my head up. My canopy's not deploying at all. It almost looks like they call it like a cigarette, right? So it's just this long, big thing, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I went right in there. I went into the bicycle kick, and again, this is the first time out of the airplane, but I had visualized this kind of moment happening, something not going right. And about the fourth time, that's about how many tangles it were. I felt it, but I was getting very close to the ground. Sergeant Airborne on the ground screaming up at me like, hey, pull a slip, Airborne. The slip is like one side or the other to kind of catch the wind to bring you in one way or the other. It was too late for that. So parachute does deploy. Man, I smash in, I roll. Parachute lands on top of me and it starts to pull me. You're supposed to unhook one rig, so you kind of get loose of that. You can pull your parachute in, pack it up. Well, he just came over and looked at me in amazement, like, oh man, he's alive. All right, it's good. Well, I'm telling you, like, I felt more alive in that moment than I've ever felt in my life. You know, I had a lot of near death, but that was pretty close. Like, I didn't pull my reserve and anything like that. So when I circle back about things that I learned in the military that are then able to apply into athletics and the visualization, that's why I talk about sometimes viewing things that could go wrong. Like to not even think about it and then to package it up, compartmentalize it, and have that, at least a blueprint for that, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I just want to get that little story in before, we go on.
Yeah, I like it because I think it's good also to, like, everybody, I feel like a lot of people try to visualize the good, especially, but like you mentioned earlier, you envision the game winner, maybe not what happens earlier in the game, but also it is very important to, what if this doesn't work? What if something does happen? But also, I think it's important. I think it's similar to kind of I think you'll agree with me. You don't want to stress on that too much because it'll start to build too much. And then you start almost psyching yourself out or stressing over something that may never happen. That's the thing. Because I've also heard, a piece of advice and stuff like that is, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever gotten? That guy answered and he said, I forget exactly what he said, but then it was what was the best piece of advice you ever got? And it was, what if it turned out better than you could have ever imagined? And when you look at it, it's also that way. Cause I mean, I've done, I'm sure you're with events and stuff like that, videos, anything that you do in life, you're like, man, especially if it's going out to the public where everybody can, per se, judge you, you start to worry a little bit about what other people think or what's going to happen. What about this? What about that? But then when you start to also get to the point of, what if it turns out better than I could have ever imagined? You got to have both, but it's important not to stress on the bad, but it's also important not to stress too much on the good, because you have to have that balance in a way.
Balance, consistency, showing up. That's just the biggest part of it, and not being afraid to take risks, and we just call that risk, don't be so risk adverse. I always say this especially to the younger athletes, you should take more risks earlier. You have more opportunity to rebound than maybe when you're a 47-year-old dad, right? That, you really got to have a better game plan, maybe, at my age, but I think younger, there's a lot of truth to that, this is not to dwell on, but I think that people don't even want to think about it at all. And I think if you can lay the game plan out, if this happens, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to be fine. But I just got to do the strategy to get me right back to where my feet are, because the biggest thing that I get from athletes is like, how do you defeat the negative self-talk? And I'm like, you don't, it's always going to be there. It's just that you have the strategy to reframe it into something good. So a lot of people step into the batter's box and all of a sudden they're already beat because the pitcher throws hard or whatever, and your teammates are talking and they haven't done what they need to do even walking in there. And you can get rid of all that by having a plan and just, my body language, man, it's got to be up. It's got to be like, I'm here, for a reason. you got to clear out the batter's box so they know that you're in there for a reason. Like, I own this space, you might own that space, but I own this space. And then, that we'd go into the focus thing there where, it's, to me, it's not time to visualize at that time. Like, you're in the moment, like you don't want to get caught daydreaming there. Right. So it's just really being in the moment, feeling the dirt under your feet, and then saying some words of positive affirmation as you're looking out there. Like, I deserve this moment. Why do you deserve it? Because you put in all the work. I know, again, I'll just go back to my own kid. I will never praise the results without adding in something that got them there. For instance, home runs hit. I don't praise the home run. I praise the work that was done behind that. I think that's huge because we end up getting into a result based that we just show up and good things happen. And it really comes down to, man, that was a great session. That was a great training session, and man, remember when you hit last Tuesday, and that really paid off, and I think that if you can rewire their brain to think like that, then it help them that it's beneficial versus just always praising the end result. My kid scored 4 touchdowns and that's great, but and I think that's where the talent eventually evens out. You don't see it so much in high school. Like, the athletes are probably going to dominate still in high school, but at the collegiate level, I'm telling you, the talent eventually evens out, or you're still more talented, but you don't have the experience yet to know what a season's like, to know what a grind's like, to know what it's like to get up at 6 a.m. and still have to, do a workout and still go to class all day long, or to a couple classes, maybe not all day long, but you just have to manage your time better to be able to figure out when to do this schoolwork, to then, do an evening practice. And I tell them, we practice way more than we play. You better find a way to have passion in the work, passion in the game, the details of the game, way more than just playing the game.
Yeah, it is the work. We've always heard it in sports, especially. It is the work off, like, out. Man, I can't even think of the quote exactly, but it's the work behind the scenes that will always generate to the work that everybody sees. And, people, it kind of goes back to that. Sometimes that must be nice saying, must be nice to be as athletic as you. And it's like, yeah, you haven't seen all the work that I've put in. Must be nice to have that much money. Oh, yeah, you haven't seen how much work I've put in for that. Like, that's the same, the behind the scenes work. That's the same in sports. That's the same in life. It carries with you. That's why sports, I love sports, all sports, because of the fact that every sport relates to life in its own unique way, and that is the beauty of them.
Yeah, and so much it boils down to preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Just like school, like, show up. Just like, I tell the guys when I talk to them, like, I didn't just jump in here today and say I want to talk to you. Like, it takes time to put things together and to think about through situations and how you're going to react to certain, maybe not the question specifically, but to general areas of questioning, and all that's, a choice that you make. And that's what you say, taking risks, but they are calculated, or they should be in a way, but then not having the fear to actually step. Right. And it is the start that stops most people. It's a great line from Brian Cain right there. And there's a lot of truth to that, because we'll do what if all the time. I know how many people get upset that person's coaching there, or how did they get that job? Well, they weren't afraid to say yes. That's how they got the job. Now, there might be nepotism here or there in some situations, of course, and that's life, and you can't control it. You can't do anything about it. So why spend time worrying about it? That's just where, I'm just wired at this point of my life different than that, but I wasn't always. Right. When I grew up, it was like, man, how do you get that new bat? Oh, it must be nice. Right. Everything must be nice. And, I didn't see that his dad was out working, 12, 14 hours. And that's where he decided to put, and invest in his child. Like, none of that made sense to me. It was just this victim mentality. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't change anything at this point in my life, my upbringing, or any of that, because it's so many life lessons packed into. I don't care where you come from. but it's really easy to say, I don't have a fair shake. I think it is. I think it's, but go to some of these third world countries, and I think you'll have a different perspective on life here. And you'll say, at least I get to wake up in America today, right?
Mhm.
Because they're out there, and I've seen them, and it's not fun. Like there's children growing up all over the world, and that the only thing that they're concerned about is, am I going to get hit with a bomb today, right? Like I just, we have so many opportunities here, and I know that because I didn't come from any of that, man. I went to the military for a reason. It's because I didn't have a lot of options at that time, but it worked out for the best. And here I am getting to chat with you. So
Well, I have a question. Like, so as a coach, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a student athlete? Um, Honestly, like at any age, maybe let's just go with the younger age, like kind of like really getting into sports, not just starting sports, but like really starting to get into it, really maybe that middle school, high school level they're really starting to take a full interest in it.
yeah, okay. So it's a great question. I think there's a huge break, and I don't know where it is, but there's something out there that says most kids stop playing sports by the age of 13. It's like 70%, right? And why is that? Well, I mean, sports is not for everybody, number one, and that's okay. But there is a thing like even mental performance. I've tried to take this down to the youngest levels, and I think that they can at least have a little bit of understanding. They do have a choice to make in some situations, but it's not going to be. I'm not trying to run them through a full Elevate program. Okay. Early on, I tried. I thought it would work for anybody, and I've just realized that, around that kind of that 14, 15 age, that's where my biggest piece of advice, because this is crazy and there's so many different situations. We're just talking about the athlete overall, that during their practice time, that how do they get to where their feet are to continue to compete, right? Even in travel sports, we've lost, which is the way that youth athletics has gone, almost all the way through. We're not seeing as many rec leagues now. So what do we do in travel sports? Well, we trim the roster way down to like 12, right? 11 or 12. And why is that? Well, parents are paying money for this product. And the product says, we're going to give you opportunities, right? And then it doesn't really matter what you do with those opportunities, but they're going to be there just over and over and over again. And I think they have lost the ability to compete. So I would challenge all of our athletes to compete. And yes, with the teammates, great, especially with like skill level and things, but we don't want to get into comparison because that is the thief of all joy. But it's so hard to do because it's a game full of stats and things like that. All games are figured with stats, and we got Game Changer, and everybody thinks that, a strikeout's the worst thing that can happen in the world. And a lot of that pressure is coming down from my generation, flowing down. Here's the issue. They don't even build up their strength yet. Like, you have no clue. Yes, you can see some body mechanics, movements, and patterns and things like that, and kind of say that person's athletic or that child's athletic, but they haven't even hit their prepubescent, right? Like, they haven't even hit puberty yet. And so many things happen there in the game when you do that. So teach them to compete and have them enjoy competition, and understanding that with competition will come failure. But can they understand and use that failure by using the well, better, how at the end of every practice, right? What did I do well today? Well, I didn't do anything well in the field. Well, were you a good teammate? Did you pick somebody up? Like, a lot of times that'll help you. Like, I just booted 2 balls. Well, that's an opportunity to say, yeah, I've got to get better there. Like, I cannot continue to do that. because I'm competing. I don't like that, but let me deflect here and just pick a teammate up in that moment, or say something or do something. So there's always opportunities out there to be better than you were, but I compete, because that's all the world is. It's a big competition. So no matter how anybody wants to spin it, that's what we're doing. We're competing.
Every single day of your life is a competition
Every
with
day.
yourself, with
Yes.
others. There's always different competitions. And I like kind of, I've always said on this podcast, I think I've said it so many times that, people that have listened a lot probably get sick of hearing it, but I will never stop saying it, is you will learn more from your failures than you ever will your successes. Your failures are the biggest learning lessons in life. So don't be afraid to fail. It's what you do with that failure to learn from it. And guess what's going to come with competition? Some failure. You're gonna fall down sometimes. You're gonna get knocked down. You're not gonna always be perfect, but that's the beauty of it, is you have somewhere to grow. And guess what? But also learning to use your strengths. Or maybe this is my strength, but I have to grow this weakness. So that's the beauty of it. In competition, it's a beautiful thing. Once college sports ended, it was very competition, like, kind of that sports competition for say, you kind of missed it a little bit and you kind of want to get back into it. That's why I actually play in volleyball leagues. So that's just my one couple times a week I get my competition in, but also that kind of stuff has opened my mindset of everything,'s a competition in its own way. Now, you don't have to be super serious about everything competition wise, but making things a competition is just the joy of it. And it's fun to compete. I'm going to also flip the question on a little bit of a scale. What is one piece of advice that you could give to maybe a young coach that is thinking about coaching or has just kind of got into the coaching realm? If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
So the biggest thing is there's so many different type of learners, right? Audio, visual, kinetic. Like there's so many types there. So coaching is a crazy dynamic. I go back to this and probably the good ones get it and flourish if that's the career path they choose. But I think that some people are so good with the X's and O's, and not as good with people. Some people are really good with people and not the X's and O's, right? So number one is constant learning. Figure out somebody that you're maybe like or aspire to be like. For me, that was John Wooden. It was a sport that I don't even play or do. It was just his principles, the way he went about practices, designing practices, all the way through how he handled adversity, how he would really pour into his players way more than and here's a phrase that I use often. I can't be your friend right now, but I'm here to be your coach, teacher, and mentor. And I think that that's the line that maybe gets crossed sometimes with maybe coaches that fail of not understanding there has to be a line there. And because I'll still go back to my coaches today and I would call them a friend now, but still probably a mentor more than a friend. Right. And, I reached out to him. I just the other day, man, I just sent him, little notes here or there. Like, man, I really appreciate what you did for me. Somebody believed in me, whether it was my high school coach, when I ended up in a high school that I knew nobody. I was just there, ninth grade. And next thing you know, I learned a lot there that, there's tons of politics that play in high school sports, but I'm so thankful that I never ran into that because my coach was going to play the best and the best for his system. So I think looking back on that, it's like one of my coaches was super X's and O's, and one of them was super with people. So I just try to be like, you have to be passionate about the sport. It's going to be different on all different levels because here's the deal. Most of it's volunteer coaching, and high school coaches, they just don't get paid anything, and it's passion for them. But they obviously, for the most part, they know the sport. And listen, there is a lot more involved there than just a product on the field. I just think of, I was able to do all. Like I've coached middle school, I've coached high school, what I would call pro athletes, right? Guys that were getting paid, even though it was softball, and now at the collegiate level. And at the end of the day, man, human beings and bringing a team together, it's way more than just having a social event somewhere, right? Like, hey, we're going to go do this mandatory fun team building exercise. Like, design your practice out before you ever go out there, please. It doesn't have to be to the T. We're all different there, but at least have some drills or something in place. I think when that looks sloppy, that this kind of the practice will go sideways. And, understand you're going to make decisions in games. You're going to make the call the wrong plays. You're going to do things like that. You're going to get Monday morning quarterback nonstop. And that's okay. Nick Saban, hey boy, he has some great ones. And his big one was, if you want to be, loved by everybody, sell ice cream, don't coach. So there's a lot of truth there. You got to have some thick skin.
Yeah, the friend versus coach thing. I mean, I think there's a time for both as a coach, but I will say, I mean, my senior year, my roommate actually came back and became a student coach, and I'll never forget the first practice that he jumped my butt and got up and it he was being a coach. And at first I was like, who the hell, like he's one of my best friends to this day. But I was like, who are you? And like, what, like, and I realized that this is coach. This isn't best friend right now. This is my coach. And it took me a second. He adjusted well. It took me a second to adjust to, I even as the athlete has to separate this as out of, you're my coach now. Like when we step between these lines, you're my coach. Now, outside of here, you're still my best friend, but it's very good to have both. And I really like what you said about that. But, kind of just to wrap all this up, I do have one question that I like to ask all of my guests, and it is, if you could go back in time and tell your 16-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Great on the spot question. And when I pose that question, well, there's a lot of things that you would change, right? But man, I've been blessed since, like I said, since 2006, and I changed my mindset. It would have to be that I got that earlier, and that's what I'm talking to now 18 to 22-year-olds, and basically I'm trying to say, hey, catch this before you turn 27, right? If you catch this now, just think you're another 5-6 years ahead of me on the curve of approaching life like this. It is freeing, man. I'm telling you, it is so freeing. And it doesn't matter what you go through. If you have the mindset and what I like to call an elevated or elite mindset, you're going to be fine, man. You're going to get through anything. But as soon as you start comparing and not having extreme ownership, it makes you go backwards, or it just keeps you stuck in the same area. You will never be able to manifest into the human being that you're made to be. That's definitely what it would be. I would put my timeline of when I was 18, 19, like you said, 16, but definitely when I hit that college, and if we're going to stay on athletics for that, but just in life in general, because I missed a lot of opportunities because of that mentality. And I will say it, I had a victim mentality that woe is me so many times, and absolutely what I would change. And that's why I'm doing it now, right? I just want to give this back, this mentality. If you can catch us early, you're going to be much better off.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's this. You hear it all the time, especially I think the big one is like financial type things, decisions. We all made financial decisions that were probably not the best when we were younger, and that's one of the things. It's the same. It correlates. But also I think if your mindset's maybe a little different, it helps with the financial side of things a lot of times too. So I agree 100%. Just being able to that's why I love so much what you guys do is, trying to catch before they maybe not go down the wrong path, but,
Yeah.
just trying to make that curve quicker, like getting on that curve quicker, like you mentioned. And it would be, I just love everything you guys do. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Dan. Where can people find you and Mindset Matters Athletics and reach out to you guys?
Yeah, so we have a pretty cool website that's designed. It kind of has everything that we have, even some clothing's on there as well. If you want to rep the MMA logo, Mindset Matters Athletics, it's a great logo that kind of Chad got designed. It was really cool. I was really pleased with it, and you can find us on mindsetmattersathletics.com. There's also a link on there to buy the book. I think it's there's digital copies all the way down to $250. Where I think that book right there is probably around $12, and we call it the Mindset Matters Playbook. And the reason for that is I would tell you to get it for your athlete, 14 and above, 13 maybe if they're kind of dealing with confidence issues or things like that, and it really just runs through the Elevate program. It tells some stories in there. And then not a lot of personal stories, but just of great athletes and their mindset and approaching the game and things like that. So the Mindset Matters Athletics Playbook is great. The Elevate book, which you just showed a copy of there, Cole. So thank you. I know you were one of the first ones to get it and read it. And, with that, you can reach out to us. We'll answer your emails for sure. I will provide any kind of guidance that I can, wherever you may be, any help that I can provide.
Yeah, I'll put all the links to everything in the
Sure.
episode description, and I also highly recommend the book. It's a great book, even like honestly for really any age. It's a quick read, and it just kind of helps really start to shift that mindset of things. I read it on vacation this summer, and it was the first book I read. I read multiple books on vacation, including Make Your Bed and that kind of stuff. It just when I'm on vacation, I like those quick reads, and that was the first one I read, and I don't think any of them topped it, just because it kind of puts you in that mindset. It really starts to elevate and makes you change the way you think about things.
Yeah, thinking patterns. And I tell you, the good thing about that book is like I almost read that all the time. Like right before we get ready to take the field, a lot of times I'll just grab an excerpt out of it, right? Because again, yes, myself and Chad wrote the book, but we used a lot of material and there's a lot of different sources in there that we provided together. And I might just read like 2 paragraphs even before I go out and talk to the team or something like that, just to kind of bring that back. And I think it's one of those books that you can throw right in your gym bag or wherever, and it's going to pay off because, like I said, you can almost open it up anywhere. It's like the Bible, but I don't want to compare it to that level. But for athletics, I read my Bible every day, and we even put some biblical stuff in there about some faith-based stuff in there as well. But the bottom line is, we have to have consistent reminders of this type of mindset, because we don't, then you will revert back. You'll revert back to a victim mentality. And there's all kinds of opportunities to do that as well.
But with that, you guys know the deal. That is a wrap on this episode of the Roughnecks podcast. And until next time, you guys know the deal. Life is hard and it's going to knock you down just like a bull does to a bull rider. Don't let that bull of life walk all over you. Get up, grab the bull by the horns, and take control of your life.